So thank you very much for coming. Good morning and welcome to the SWOOP benchmarking report for Yammer webinar. So I'm Nick Götz. I'm Director of Sales for SWOOP. I'm located in London. And with me, I've got a few of our team members. And can you please introduce yourself quickly, Sharon?
Yeah, well, thank you everyone for joining us. It's great to see you all online here. I'm actually based in Australia with Laurie. I'm in the snowy mountains in New South Wales, and we've just finished up a heat wave, and suddenly we've got this change in weather with cool weather. So I've been able to don my new swoop jumper. So I do the communications for the external communications for SWOOP, and I know I've spoken to quite a few of you just writing case studies, doing some interviews with you, and I do things like the website and social media. So if anyone's ever got any questions or any case studies you'd like written up, I would love to be in contact with you.
Thank you. Laurie?
Hi, I'm Laurie Lockley. I'm a co-founder of SWOOP and the chief scientist. So I'm the one that designs all the algorithms that sits behind SWOOP, and also a co-author of the benchmarking report that we're going to talk about today. So welcome all.
On the call as well as Kai. He has a quick wave quickly. Thank you. He will be in the chat with me later. So today we talk about the 2020 benchmark report for Yammer, and many had a chance to download it and maybe even read it completely. But today we take Sharon and Lawrence will talk about the key findings and we'll look into that. We're also joined by Patricia Mars from KLM. She's the community manager for internal social media. And additionally, we have as well Sarah Perry and Danny Lindley from Chaucer. Sarah is the head of knowledge management, and Danny is the head of corporate communication engagement. I wrote it down. I read it off because I wasn't quite sure if I mix it up, but just to be under control. We'll talk about some of their communities, which we identified as the high-performing communities in their network. So we have some great examples from all three of them. Quickly talk about the housekeeping rules. We record this webinar, so I can send it out after the event to everybody who registered, signed up, and naturally who is on the call as well. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Kai will keep an eye on it. I will keep an eye on it, and I hope we can answer everything. And if not, we maybe open up then the microphone if we have the time at the end, and we can ask Sharon and Lawrence directly about the benchmarking reports. So with that, let me hand it over to Laurie and Sharon, and take us away.
Thanks, Nick. Let me just sort of quickly share my screen. We don't have a truckload of slides, you'll be pleased to know. So we have designed it to have a fair bit of discussion, interaction in the middle of this presentation. So this is our sixth annual report, SWOOP. It sounds like it's a long time since the first one. The first one we had 16 organisations. This time we've got 116 organisations, 2.5 million employees. Those organisations, nearly 9,000 Yammer communities. So it's a huge number. It gets bigger every year. And basically, unlike most survey type benchmarks, ours uses the actual activity of people on the Yammer platform. So each of those 9,000 communities, we've been able to anonymously mine their interactions and develop and look at the patterns of interactions there are, apply our own SWOOP measure to those, and create our ratings and rankings of the communities. So this year, very much more data driven this year. We've done even more statistical analysis of communities, because not all communities are the same. And as you know, some of them are communities and communities of practice, but some of them are Q&A forums, some of them are purely for information sharing. Some of them are there to just announce things and so forth. So we're respectful of that, and the statistics actually tells us which ones you are likely to be based on your interactions. A big part of what we do in benchmarking is we set goals, and we set those goals based on the performance of the communities that we benchmark. So this year we've identified most of the goals we're setting at the the level of the top 20% of the communities. So as you can see, we've got 9,000 communities. You know, if you're in the top 1%, you're doing pretty well in the top 89. And we're certainly did a deep dive into the communities, and we're going to talk to, in fact, Patricia and Sarah, who have examples of communities in that top 1%. Of course, the case studies are always the things that add a lot of colour to the benchmarking report, and we've been fortunate to have Sharon on board for the last few years, and she works very hard to get these case studies together, but it's worth it, because this is where you start to learn from other people's stories, and you can hopefully sort of practice emulating some of the things that they're doing and so forth. So we're going to spend a fair bit of time talking with Patricia and Sarah, and Sharon's going to preview some of the case studies that are in the report. Of course, this year and last year, you know, the big thing is COVID, and of course that's impacted all of us. We're certainly talking in the report about what those impacts are through the lens of Yammer. And finally, this is my research indulgence. We call it the SWOOP Digital Brain. Basically, Yammer sits within an ecosystem of Office 365. I read a report today, in fact, from Microsoft that was suggesting that, you know, the thing that was suffering most from working from home was the ability to be creative and innovate. And in fact, we believe that that's the role that Yammer plays in the ecosystem. One of the roles, of course, that it plays in the ecosystem. So in this section, we speculate about how we can look and manage and use Yammer in the context of the whole environment, and we've labelled that the digital brain. So you can indulge me and read that and send any sort of questions or inquiries you have around that, because it's really part of the future searching on our part. I'm going to leave this up. Unfortunately, I think most people are aware of these Q codes now. We pretty much have to scan them on our phones just about everywhere we go. Even in Australia, we've had no cases. I'm boasting now for, I think, you know, at least 10 days in New South Wales. So, but nevertheless, even though we've had no COVID cases, you know, you go to a shop, a restaurant, anywhere, you've got to scan one of these. So if you haven't sort of downloaded the benchmarking report, you know, you can do the same here. Hold your phone up to this Q code, and you'll get the report link, or you can just go to our website. That's pretty easy. I'm going to leave it up at the end of the talk, so if you haven't been quick enough, that's fine. You'll get it later on. Okay, so now I'm going to pass over to Sharon, and she's going to go through the key findings, summarise the key findings that we've got from the report. So over to you, Sharon.
Thanks very much, Laurie, and thank you everybody for joining us. Please feel free just to jump in and ask a question at any time. Just unmute yourself and jump in and ask if you've got anything at all you're interested in talking about. So one of the key findings we found, as you know, that this is actually the world's largest analysis of Yammer networks. So we did 116 organisations around the world, and we looked at almost 9,000 Yammer communities in a deep dive. So we actually found that there were record levels of activity during the COVID-19 transition period as people moved to working from home. So the benchmarking period that we looked at went from the 1st of March till the 31st of August. And we found certainly in that March-April period, that's where the levels of Yammer activity increased, and this was as employees were moving to working from home, and I guess it's connecting online, and that was the big key. What we did find, though, is after that April, as people started to settle into working from home, the levels of responsiveness and engagement actually between staff increased, even though Yammer activity overall actually dropped off a little bit in the sample that we analysed. So it would suggest with these higher levels of responsiveness and engagement between staff, it suggests that there's been these stronger working relationships were actually formed during this initial work from home period. We also found that staff sentiment was actually far more positive than negative, especially during these first 6 months of the global pandemic. And actually in the early days of working from home, sentiment was at its highest positive levels. So it did start after those first 2 months, it sort of started to drop off a little bit. in that it became, rather than what we measured as strongly positive to somewhat positive. But overall, we saw no real movement in negative sentiment across the whole 6-month sample. So that was pretty interesting as well. I found that quite surprising. We also have an opt-in option, and I'm sure a lot of you did opt in for this. We've got a new feature in SWOOP which searches for keywords, and we provide a word cloud. So this is not something that we, as you know, only see metadata. We don't actually see proper words come out when we analyze SWOOP, analyze your data. But we did have companies opt in to look at the word clouds and the keywords. We actually found the most common word that was used during this 6-month period was thanks. So I guess it's sort of showing that people aren't completely obsessed with talking about COVID-19 or other issues. It was actually more about maybe recognition and, you know, working with your teammates on Yammer. So the next most popular words we came across were team, then it was people, information, time, week, and customer. So they all sound like it's pretty much work going on. Then we'll move to some of the common themes we found. So as Laurie said, we spoke to about probably 25 Yammer community managers around the world as part of the research. So these were some of the top performing Yammer communities. And we found some really common themes that emerged from every community manager we spoke with. And we're going to, luckily enough, to speak to some very soon. The main one was about keeping Yammer fun. And we literally had examples. There was Westpac New Zealand, which is a bank in New Zealand, one of New Zealand's biggest banks. One of their most popular Yammer communities was literally called Dad's Jokes, and it was a Yammer community where people just went in and put their dad jokes there. Sometimes some of the other really popular things is just about something as simple as a happy birthday post or a Yammer exercise class, or, you know, ideas about how to keep your kids entertained while you're working from home. There was actually one of our customers had a Yammer community called Convince Me Otherwise, and it was one of the top performers out of the 9,000 that we did the deep dive into. And it was a group where someone makes a statement that often controversial, and then their colleagues had to convince them otherwise. And some of the examples they shared with us was, I think Pearl Jam's a better band than Nirvana, convince me otherwise. It was that sort of stuff, and these were the really popular communities. So obviously not all of these are about work specifically, but we also had customers. One example was Wiley, the global publishing company. They were saying, you know, it's really important to have these other fun groups and these community groups, because it's about, you know, you get people, these are the things that will draw people into Yammer. So their example was, you know, you come in for the pet groups, but you'll actually stay for the work. So keeping Yammer fun was one of the key findings we found. Another one was about making health and well-being a priority during the pandemic. We've got so many examples of that. You know, it was things like one company was they tried to get as many employees as they could involved in a heart foundation initiative to raise funds for heart disease research, and each employee was encouraged over I think it was a 2 or 3 month period, to walk 42 kilometres and be sponsored for it. They actually found it was just so helpful for the mental and physical well-being of their employees, because a lot of people had been relying on, you know, the commute to work, where they have to walk from the train station to get to their offices, and this was no longer happening. They were walking from their bedroom to their lounge room to go to work. So you know, there were ideas about keeping physically healthy and also mentally as well. And we've got lots of examples in the report about well-being and the priority that was given on many of the top performing Yammer communities. Another one was ensuring leaders communicate and that the leaders make themselves accessible. We've got great examples of that. You may have heard of Australia's top telecommunications or biggest telecommunications companies called Telstra. They've got some network in the UK and Europe as well. and their CEO was doing daily live Yammer updates. And it was just an opportunity where he could be on camera. People were able to use Yammer to ask questions along the way. And he was doing this daily for the first 6 weeks. Then it started to drop off to, I think it was every 3 days. And even now, I believe he's still doing it two days a week, doing these live Yammer broadcasts. Then one of the final things we found for the most common themes talking to the top performers in the report was a flattening of the hierarchy. And that ties in with what we were just talking about with leaders communicating and making themselves accessible. We've got some great examples. One of the private health insurers who was one of the top Yammer community winners in our report, they would have their executives literally in the bedroom. You could see videos where they had their kids in there and they were just doing a rundown of what they'd been doing through the day. And it was that whole idea of bringing executives into your living room and you being able to go and see their lives as well. So there was a lot of examples of the I guess the informal socialization moving from the office to online, and that was reflected in Yammer as well. So they were certainly some of the key findings, and we can talk a little bit more about those really soon. I haven't been catching up with all these comments on the side. Are people sharing some examples?
Great. So anyway, as our norm, we do identify leading organisations in both in sizes of large and medium and small. I won't dwell on this because there wasn't any European ones, unfortunately, but what was exciting is this next bit, because this is the part that was unique to this particular report, the amount of individual communities that we analysed. As Sharon said, nearly 9,000. We applied our new algorithms to those, and we sort of worked out who the top 1% were. That was 89 communities. We did identify those organisations that had multiple communities in there. So you can see at the top there, we have KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and ANZ and Telstra are Australian Bank, and Telstra we've talked about, Coca-Cola's up there. And we've got a European there in Kingfisher. Also, of course, Agreco is European, and Chaucer, Sarah, and KLM actually aren't on this list, but they have a community in the top 1%, and also another one just outside of that. I'm sure Patricia will talk about that. But also on that pie chart on the left, you can see the algorithms that we use have identified that the largest proportion of the top 1% are actually communities working as communities of practice. So nearly half of them are that. The next lot is the Q&A forums, another popular use of Yammer communities. So that was 39%. And then there was 13% communities that are really just set up for sharing information. So not really looking to necessarily engage the membership, but simply for sharing information. Of course, the announced group isn't in the top 1%, and also the other classification, which is basically the poorly connected communities, and there's a reasonable number of those. They, of course, don't make the top 1%. So that was interesting in itself, and it does confirm to us, what we sort of expect to see, I guess, and that our classification algorithms are actually doing a reasonable job. So I want to sort of hand over now to Sharon and Patricia and Sarah and the people from Chaucer to talk a little bit about their communities. What was sort of interesting when we went back to a lot of these organisations. I think Sharon said we spoke to, I don't know, up to 20 of them. We often went and said, well, these are your top communities, and some of them they'd say, oh yeah, because we remember that SWOOP doesn't know what the communities are. We've just got an ID number, so we have to give them the ID number and say, can you tell us what that community is? And so we don't know and they don't know. And then often they'll say, oh, yeah, I know that community, that's whatever. But more often than not, they'd also say, oh, I don't know who they are. Oh, yeah, I sort of know where they are, but I didn't know they were doing such good stuff. And, in fact, I think the guys from Wiley said, oh, there's a sales community. We always have problems with the salespeople, getting onto Yammer, and they want to use Salesforce and so forth. And there's this group up in Boston. Oh, we'll have to seek them out and say, look, it can work for salespeople and so forth. But nevertheless, the quite achieving community is really quite exciting to find. And And I think, in fact, I think KLM actually did have a few that we identified that were surprises to them, and hopefully they'll be able to talk about some of those. So back over to you, Sharon. I'll just stop sharing actually, because then we can just have the faces on the screen.
Thanks, Laura. Well, that's a perfect segue, because Patricia, you probably remember Laurie sent you an email with the Yammer ID for your top performing community that was in this top 1%. And it was one that, well, can you tell us the story, please? It was one that you weren't really expecting to see.
Yeah, so it was a support community that was a little off the radar, where we have some big cabin crew and pilot communities online. And yeah, last year we had a big rollout of a single sign-on system, IT system, which they made a dedicated Yammer group for. It was a small group of cabin crew who were asking questions about how to make use of the new system. And IT colleagues, they were actively replying to the questions and taking in all the feedback of the system. It wasn't something that we were as community managers really promoting or pushing, but it was really happening, just the cabin crew and IT colleagues connecting themselves. So they were creating a knowledge base, a big database, and cabin crew were helping each other in the end to get onto this new system. You guys mentioned that was the community was doing really well, so we were able to make use of that knowledge and then roll it out to our pilot communities as well, who were also now actively using the community to ask their questions. And it was a big success, because it was, of course, already a big database of knowledge that they can tap into. And recently we've also rolled it out to the whole company, so we're now expanding the community and making use of all the information.
Yeah, I love that story. Actually, Laurie, first, can you just stop sharing your screen, because we're seeing everyone through your... Yeah, so just press on the cross at the top there. Can you see it?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Yep. Yep. Then we're not getting the delay. Oh, look at that. That's what I loved about that, Patricia, is so you, by identifying this high performing community, you're able to tap into it and share that knowledge across the rest of the organization. So really, when you're looking at it from an ROI point of view or a business value point of view, you've got all that knowledge, all that information there. It must be saving, a lot of time, a lot of resources.
Yeah, so the feedback was really quick to reach the team, which they found was of added value. And we have an intranet as well, where Q&As are placed, and questions shared by colleagues were able to be used as input for these Q&As, which the rest of the company then can use. So it makes their life a little easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that story. And one of the other top performing Yammer communities you had at KLM was one called Blue Heroes. And I loved this story. I mean, obviously, we all know that airlines are amongst the hardest hit industries during the COVID-19 pandemic. Can you explain the Blue Heroes community? And I think you were also, you were touching on a little bit how leaders actually got involved in that too.
Yeah. So unfortunately, due to the pandemic, a lot of colleagues have had to leave our company, and we had a big group of colleagues leaving with our voluntary resignation scheme last year, beginning December. But of course, due to the pandemic, many of us haven't been able to see each other either at the offices or on board, because flights weren't as regular as usual. So colleagues didn't know as fast from each other that they were leaving after working for the company for all this time. So we decided to open a community, the Blue Heroes community, our CEO, he kicked it off with a personal message thanking the colleagues and just sharing some stories. And colleagues were able to use this platform to say their last goodbyes, sort of, to share photos or good memories. And we really saw that in this period, it was about 2 months that the community was actively used. At the moment, it's a little quieter because the colleagues have left and business is going on. But colleagues were really connecting during this time and replying, not just broadcasting their messages, but replying and interacting with each other. So we had, I think, 61% interactivity within the community, and some of our executive team members were also replying to the goodbye messages. So that was really nice. And we want to keep this community going. We have unfortunately, another wave coming. So then this place will be there where colleagues can share their virtual goodbyes, and it can really become part of the employee journey.
Yeah, I really like that. I don't like the fact that, that people are having to leave, but I like that there's been this community where people can come together because, like if you're leaving a job, usually you might have your farewell with your, particular group. I guess one benefit of doing something like this on Yammer is that people that you worked with 20 years ago but you haven't seen since are still able to connect and maybe share some memories, share some photos and things like that. So in a way, it gives people a lot more opportunity to pass on those farewells and I guess have those final connections as well, which you don't actually get face to face.
No, we had a lot of messages saying, oh, I didn't know you were leaving. I worked with you 15 years ago at this department. Sad to see you go. Let's connect via LinkedIn or something.
Yeah, that's nice. So is that something that, when the world does return to normal and you won't be having these sort of redundancies or retirements, is that sort of a Yammer community that you'd continue on, I guess, as part of the recognition program within KLM and, again, just that connection between employees?
Yeah, that is the goal. So we'll just see how it goes. But I'm definitely for keeping the place for colleagues to be able to have share their goodbye.
Yeah. And Patricia, you were saying that that Yammer community kicked off with the CEO sending a message and I guess encouraging people to share their stories and things on there. Can you give some other examples, especially during, the past year, how your leaders have been using Yammer to connect and engage with employees?
Yeah, so we've had, within our company, we have different communication channels, which our CEO and our executive team members use. Not all are on Yammer, which is, of course, maybe our goal, but it's one of the dreams. But there are some nice examples. So like the personal messages that our CEO then sends are really appreciated by colleagues. And within the in-flight services, our cabin crew and pilot communities, there the leaders and management are really active and really replying on a daily basis, weekly basis to any questions. So also last minute changes to our operation, they are in there just trying to get a feeling for what's happening, for how everyone is feeling and doing, and trying to give updates or sharing what they're working on. So that is really driving those in-flight and pilot communities.
Yeah, because what I didn't explain is, so just for everyone else, so with KLM, the two I guess most active Yammer communities you have is one was in-flight services, which was all the flight, is that the right name for it?
Yeah, that's about 8,000 cabin crew colleagues who are in a sort of general community where they can talk about basically anything regarding their work. and it's actively moderated by a team of community managers. And also our pilots have an active community. When they're doing their work, they only are in contact with a small group of colleagues. So their team on their flight, going from our crew center to the flight to their destination hotel room and then back, they don't really have a connection with our ground staff. So that is why they're so active on Yammer, is that they're able to have that connection with ground staff and learn who's behind the new projects and plans and get real-time updates.
Yeah, so I guess for a lot of your employees, Yammer almost becomes that virtual office, doesn't it? Because I know one of the community managers, Yap, that we spoke with, he is a flight attendant, and he was saying that every day you're working with a different crew, and often they're people that you've never met before. They're complete strangers. Exactly. So Yammer becomes this virtual office for, a transient staff, I guess. Down to the point, I think you were saying that you discuss like where good hotels are when you're in different cities around the world. Where good restaurants are, hotels, all that sort of stuff. All of those really day-to-day logistics that actually make a huge impact for your employees. Those sorts of tips and tricks are all discussed on Yammer. Is that right?
Yeah, but also, of course, handy tips that crew find how to make their work easier. So how to fold the part of the meal service efficiently, so that how do you say it? That the sandwiches are packed in a little box, and they found a way how to fold that in a more efficient way. They share that, and all the teams are able to make use of the tip. Those kind of work things. It's not just the social side. It's also more, making their work life easier.
Yeah, so real business value there, as well as that employee engagement, which again, how do you put a price on happy employees too, and satisfied employees? Exactly. I know we were also speaking with Maud, who's one of the pilots. Oh, Patricia, I think everyone might be a little bit jealous, but so with your in-flight Yammer community, you said you had about 8,000 or 9,000 people on that, and I think it was 8 or 9 Yammer community managers you have monitoring that community?
At the moment it's I believe about 6. They're in a little bit of a transition period now as well, but there's quite a few of them, and they are able to moderate the community 7 days a week, as also our cabin crew is of course flying 24/7, so they're able to share their questions anytime, and then the opening hours of the community, or so to say, are from, I believe, 8 in the morning till 10 in the evening. So questions are picked up and shared outside of office hours as well.
And so do you think, for others that are listening to this conversation at the moment, do you think that's one of the keys to your success, the fact that you've actually had community managers sort of monitoring your communities and being able to sometimes, tag the right people into conversations or forward it to the right groups?
Yeah, definitely. Just to keep an eye on the community, that it's driven by them. When they want to start a conversation about a specific something that's happening within the company, it goes through the community managers as well sometimes, just to keep the whole group together. And of course they're tagging experts and helping experts or experts, colleagues that know a lot about a product, and how they can best give an answer, or how they can use the communities, how management can reply as well, and just make their life a little easier. They're training them in that as well.
One of the favourite stories that one of the pilots shared with us was this great story. She was saying that early, I think it was about June, one of the pilots noticed that they were, even though they had a half load of passengers on the plane, they were still carrying a full load of water as if you had a full plane full of passengers, which meant a lot of extra weight, and the extra weight means extra cost and extra environmental issues that come with that for extra fuel that's not needed. Can you tell me about this story, please, Patricia? Share this story.
Yeah, so during the start of the pandemic, it was everything was changing at a very high pace, and all the systems had to be adjusted. There were different passenger numbers coming in. They were changing on a daily basis. So a pilot was quick to notice that there was much more water being tanked into his flight than was actually necessary, which of course is not is a waste, because more weight is more fuel, and that is something that we preferably want to take less of. So normally these loads they're adjusted correctly, but it seemed it was a fault in the system. So the question was posted in their Yammer community, and the community managers of flight operations, they were quick to tag the correct department, the correct expert who was able to dive into it and find this fault, the bug, and quick to adjust it. And they were able to adjust it so that this was not happening for all flights, which was, of course, great news. Normally we have a system to share these issues as well, but it's a special reporting system, but it takes quite often a little longer before it reaches the correct department. So as the community managers were able to quickly tag the correct colleague, correct expert, it was solved in a matter of days. So that was I think also a great example, and one of the extra advantages was that the pilots, they were able to follow the whole process of this fix. So that is also one of the positive advantages of a Yammer community.
Oh, absolutely.
We see that quite regularly, don't we? We see that Yammer is actually faster than the formal processes in a lot of situations, and certainly we've interviewed in the past where, for example, a typical call center with its escalation processes, and that can take forever, but a simple post on Yammer, the customer can have the answer in minutes. So I think it really does play a role in even with formal processes in place. So that's a great story.
Yeah.
So if anyone needs a reason as why to use of the business value of Yammer, there's a perfect example right there. But you're right, Laurie. At the end of the day, Patricia, even things like reducing the water and saving on the fuel, eventually it all goes back to the customer, because you're saving money for the company. Where at the end of the day, hopefully that means prices don't rise. So all these examples of.
Point out that Patricia told us about the community managers. People say, "Oh, how can you have so many community managers?" Well, in fact, they are recruited from the actual, the crew one. They're actually they're recruited and work part time, don't they? Some of them, and then they actually go back into their job as well. So they're learning about Yammer, but they're also coming from being a crew service member or something like that as well. So it's a great way of recruiting people into the community manager role and cycling them through. In fact, I think it's a great idea if you can do that, because it's not just a special role where they don't necessarily know the context; they actually come from that context. And
they're also able to reply to the messages shared on Yammer by their own experiences, because last week they were also on their flight and they may have experienced that. So it makes it much more part of the community than this external team answering questions and tagging the right people.
Mm-hmm. We should go
I think Kai has a question quickly.
Oh,
Kai, you can ask a question. Does he?
It's on mute,
Maybe
maybe.
not. You're on mute.
I can see the hand raised.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we'll jump in, Kai, if you
Okay.
get the opportunity. But I also, when we were Sarah and Danny from Chaucer, I just wanted to ask you guys about this. Similarly to what we did with Patricia, we sent, or Laurie sent you an email. Hi, Sarah. Sent you an email just with some IDs. We saw in that previous slide you had 2 Yammer communities that were in the top 1% of the 9,000 that we benchmarked. And now I haven't heard this story yet, Sarah, so I'm keen to hear it. But you did say that the top one was a wellbeing community, which fits in with the themes that we were talking about from our other winners.
Yeah, absolutely. So that wellbeing community, I think it had started quite quietly in early January 2020. And it wasn't until actually we needed it that it was there and it came alive. And over the course of 2020, there were a number of competitions that we ran. And this is coming from all different parts of the organization, different people leading it, but always kind of having it grounded in the well-being community. And we did things like there was a healthy recipes competition, so we were asking people to give healthy recipes of to keep up their kind of their energy and their food whilst they're at home. We had competitions for there was actually one for Pride. So in June we did a Pride one where we asked people to share pictures of rainbows, and so we had people organizing their bookshelves by color. We had pictures of people, all anything kind of rainbow related. And then there's an International Wellbeing Week, and as part of that we encouraged people to share what they were doing physically, so physical exercises. And just throughout the year there were just things that we were doing. I think another one was we actually sent out origami kits, well, not origami kits, but bits of paper to people, and we asked everybody to make a little origami thing, and then we had a competition for who could come up with the most creative origami creation. So that was a really lovely one as well. So yeah, just lots of things. And because those were the competitions, and they were fun, and it was well-being related, a lot of people engaged with it, because I think a lot of people, whilst working from home, they needed those ideas, they needed that support. And I think what we've also seen in that community now is that people are sharing and really kind of opening up, and in a sense showing their vulnerability, but also so that then others join in too. It's an incredibly honest and open community. It's really quite a supportive place as well. We do you can maybe see in my background on Teams, we have mental health first aiders at Chaucer, and so those people also get involved in the wellbeing community. So whenever there's anything going on, then we'll make sure that one of us post something to kind of help and give people ideas. So yeah, there's a lot going on there. And Danny, I don't know if there's anything that you'd want to add about that particular community.
No, I think
sorry,
summarized it really well. For us, this has been this has been really where people come together, and we had a lot of our senior leadership involved as well. I think one post that went quite through the roof, I'm not sure whether it was actually in well-being, but that was our managing director sharing a picture of his desk, and suddenly everybody shared their working from home places, and that was a huge engaging post. So we had everybody in the business sort of joining in from various angles, which was really powerful and really helpful.
Yeah.
We have some questions from the audience around using live events, Yammer versus Teams, something around onboarding and well-being. I think we've covered the well-being a little bit, Sarah, but maybe talk about positioning Yammer and Teams, and if you're doing any live events.
So we've always gone down the route of saying, and I think somebody also put this in the chat, we use Teams for teamwork and for collaboration with the people that you know. So you set the team up, you have the people that you need, you add people as you realize that your team needs to get bigger, but that's all within Teams, and that all of the teams in Teams are private. And then in Yammer, we use for that connect with anybody. And you don't know who might know. So all of our communities in Yammer are open. And if I see that a private one has been created, I'll go and have a chat and find out what the objectives are of it and why they're using Yammer as opposed to using Teams, and kind of suggest that maybe they need a team for it, or maybe they need to make it open. And in most times people go, oh yeah, well yeah, I'll make it open then. So so that's how we make that really clear use case, that Yammer is for when potentially you want to talk to absolutely everybody. So the other community that was in the top 1%, that was our change managers community. And so we have a community of practitioners, and they actually have a team where they're working on stuff and they're debating and they're creating methodologies that we use and all of that kind of thing. But that happens in Teams for collaboration. And then when they want to kind of spread the word of what's going on, or they're holding an event where they want anybody could come to learn about change management, then that's what they use Yammer for. So it's really part of that whole ecosystem that we're using Teams for collaboration, we're using Yammer for connecting across the organization, and we're using SharePoint for our kind of repository of knowledge, and kind of keeping each thing to what it's really good at. So that's how that's what kind of works for us. And what was the other question? That was about Teams versus Yammer. Live events.
I guess onboarding. We've unfortunately,
Yes.
you talk about offboarding, but it might be for those who are lucky enough to be able to onboard. There was a question about how you do that.
Yeah. So that was, and I'm really glad that Danny was here, as she was back in March. So we needed to onboard people on the first day of lockdown in the UK. So,
really?
So that was really fun because normally we would do a whole week of onboarding and it would all be face to face, and they would get an opportunity to go out for lunches and don't know. So everybody was at home, and what we did was we set up a team and we invited all of the new joiners, and then we invited the people who were then going to be helping with doing the kind of the onboarding presentations. So that all happened in the team, and we used the channel so that they could do kind of exercises and kind of all of the collaboration that we would normally be doing face to face. And we used things like Whiteboard. We discovered Microsoft Whiteboard there and then. I don't think any of us had used it before. So that was very rapid learning. And what was fantastic was that group. They continued to use that team for weeks and weeks after. They would have a regular kind of Friday catch up with each other and meet up for coffee and things like that. So that was all happening in the team. And then the other thing that we do is we ask everybody to do an introduction on Yammer and to say hello. And, we say to them, this is your opportunity to get to know everybody in the organization. So, obviously say a bit about, why you've joined us and what your skills are and your expertise and what, where you've come from, but also tell us a little bit about you. And so, tell us a little bit about, what are your passions? What do you do outside of work? And doing that really then helps people to go, they might not comment on the fact that, you've got, experience as a change manager or an innovator or whatever, but they'll go, oh, I want to go to San Francisco too. I'll ask you for some tips. So it's all of that kind of personal stuff. And the other thing that we've started to do quite recently is actually ask them to do, we were doing that back then, I remember. We asked them to do a video. So they use whatever they can. sometimes you ask them to do a video and say, oh, how are we going to do that? But they've been so creative, and they share their video, and then of course that in itself gets engagement as well. So that gets shared onto Yammer. So they might work on it in teams and then post it to Yammer, and that's a great way for everybody to kind of connect with them. So that's the onboarding part.
Wonderful.
And we did use live events for a bit, Danny, but you were more involved with that than I was. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and why we don't use live events anymore?
They were not Yammer live events though, so we haven't really gone into down that route. We've toyed with the Teams live events to begin with, because we have an all hands meeting which is global from the US and the UK. And we thought, it was sort of held in person before, and we needed an alternative to it, and live events seemed like a really good idea. We soon realized that it has its limitations. It's very broadcasty, and that's what it's supposed to do, and that's great, but it didn't quite fit with our engaging way of, people like here are using the chat and they like to see more speakers. So I think even though the analytics are fabulous, because you get sort of the download of who dialed in and all of those beautiful things, we moved to a regular Teams call, because it's much more interactive. People can come off mute, come on camera, and just ask their questions then and there. But no, we've not explored the possibility in Yammer itself, because actually Teams calls like this work for us really, really well. But maybe something in the future.
Yeah, I think it was actually Telstra, wasn't it, Sharon, that did use the Yammer. Was it the Yammer live?
Yeah, the CEO, and they were the same. They just got thrown in 24 hours notice, had never used it before, and they have, I think, 40,000 people on the Yammer network. Yeah. But it all went really successfully, and then they did it every day, and they're continuing to do it a few times a week now. Yeah.
And that was to get the Yammer responses and so forth. So they didn't want it to be broadcasting, obviously, and so apparently it worked quite well. I mean, it seemed to. I'm sure there were glitches with 40,000 people, but they hadn't used it before, so it was very much let's give this a go today. And I think what they told us, it seemed to work okay. So every day, 40,000 people.
Well, I'm just conscious of the time, Laurie. Sarah and Danny and Patricia, it's so great to talk to you. Has anyone got any other questions that they'd like to ask Sarah, Danny or Patricia right now? Otherwise, Laurie will just do a final wrap-up of some of the other findings from the report.
There are a heap of questions coming in about home feed and things, and we won't be able to cover them all today, I promise you that. There's some really good ones coming in, and I guess one of the things to remind you all of is that Microsoft does have a Yammer community, and Timothy, maybe you can, I'm not sure whether you are able to put a link into the global Microsoft Yammer community. Otherwise, you can also join the SWOOP customer community, and we can send you invites for that and keep the conversations going there. But I'll hand back to you, Sharon.
Yeah, well, why don't we also look, if everyone's interested, sorry, Laurie, I'm interrupting. If everyone's interested, why don't we look at doing another little get together like this, in a few weeks' time, and we can just keep this conversation going if anyone's interested in doing so.
Yeah. Oh,
anyway, over to you, Laurie.
Yeah. Am I sharing at the moment, Sharon? I wasn't sure.
You're not, no.
Okay, just a sec. I better. Whoa.
Oh.
No.
Oops. All right, everyone's in. We're in, Nick. There you go. Let's do that then. We'll. I hope. Can we get Sarah and Patricia and Danny back on board, and hopefully everyone else can join in too. It's not sharing, Laurie, at the moment. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, I'm not sure what's going on. I don't. It's. There's. I mean, I think we've had the most valuable part of the share content. Oh, sorry, I'm getting there. So. All right. Hopefully you're seeing that now. Just got too many.
Yep, that's come up now. Yep.
Okay. I mean, really, just reinforcing what Sharon had gone through. I mean, we did look at this usage pattern over the time, and this shaded areas where people moved to home, and of course, we saw declines with all of them, but not this one. We had companies that just kept going pretty much, but they did pretty much transition according to what industry was hit the most. But I would say that, in this group there were the airlines and the universities and so forth, but KLM wasn't one of them. So I think they're a good example where, you can avoid the sort of trough, even though, they lost a lot of people, they still kept the spirit up, if you like. As Sharon said, the sentiment, we actually did see a big boost, in that April, just after people went home. They loved it, Of course, reality kicks in after a while and dropped off a little bit, but the negative sentiment, as Sharon said, it didn't really go up at all. It actually went even down a little bit. We already talked about the keyword cloud, so I won't dwell on that. I think I'll finish though with the goals, because the objective of benchmarking is to identify what good looks like and what should we be aiming for. And with the way that we're analysing the communities now, it's very easy for us to draw a line at the top 20% and say, all right, we think 20% is a good level to set a goal. That means that, it's aspirational for most people or most communities, but, at least 20% of the communities are actually achieving that goal now. So you'll see in the report particular goals that we have. And in fact, those of you that are using SWOOP will actually see on your little widgets a little flag now. And that flag is sort of where the goal from benchmarking is being set, and of course, if your context doesn't match that, you can change that goal yourself. So, and we set those goals for the 4 different community types. So we recognise that not all communities are the same. You've got a community of practice. Particular measures will be more important than if you've got a Q&A forum and so forth. This is a little bit of an advertisement for our next UK event, which is around goal setting. So, we've spent a lot. I think it's a big thing for me now, because we've been advertising goals and publishing them in the Yammer benchmarking report for 6 years now. It's taken us that long to actually get those goals into the platform. So what you're seeing now in a report, you can actually see on the dashboard, and it makes it real for you. You can say, well, how am I going against that goal? And of course, as I've said before, you can actually, if your context doesn't suit those goals, you can adjust them yourself. So I'm going to have a webinar purely on all about goal setting, how you set a SWOOP goal and how you work towards them and so forth. So certainly sign up for that, and the Q code is there. I'll leave that on for a little while, because there's no more slides other than to show another Q code back to where you can download the report. But as I said, if you go to our website, it's pretty clear where the report is. If you want to download it, it's just a little over 100 pages, so it takes a little while to get through, but it's well worth it, I might say. And of course, the questions you're asking about Yammer versus Teams are actually addressed in the SWOOP brain. So you'll see some thoughts that we've had there about how knowledge flows from something that might be creative in Yammer through to actually doing things and delivering value through Teams. So if you're interested in that perspective of Yammer and Teams, that's what we cover in the digital brain. So I think our time is up. So we'll go to... You did
very well, Laurie, to sneak through those last few slides.
Yes, so thanks very much. Well, I think we had quite a roll up, and we certainly appreciate your attendance. And I'll put the Q code back up again for you that might have missed it. Okay, so
thank you very much, Laurie, Sharon, and a special thanks to Patricia, Sarah, and Danny for sharing their stories. There's a huge interest. It's still going on, as you can see in the chat, and we will definitely set up another session, maybe end of February, beginning of March, just to keep that flowing. On the other side as well, if you have stories you want to share, please let us know. We invite you as a kind of speaker as well, and share your experience you had during COVID, the work from home period with Yammer and with Teams. So yeah, looking forward to hearing more of the stories and
of course, if you have Yammer and you're not on SWOOP, you can certainly trial SWOOP for free. And if you do that, your data does become anonymously part of the database for benchmarking. And in fact, for some of our people prospecting, we can actually benchmark you against the average of the average scores of the 116 that we have, or it'll be more as if you join. So it's a good way of seeing where you sit in terms of performance, and a lot of our clients sort of love to see that, how do we compare? So after all, it's only numbers, but when you see how your numbers compare with other people's numbers, it becomes quite interesting. So I might leave it there.
And also just a reminder, if anyone's using Teams as well, we've got up until the 15th of February to sign up for our Teams benchmarking. So again, it's all your data's anonymous, and if you are one of the top performers, we'll contact you, and it's up to you whether or not you'd want to be named. And Laurie would also prepare an individual benchmarking report for you to see how your organisation compares with the best in the world. So if anyone's got any questions, actually, I'll share the link to sign up, but otherwise just contact Nick as well.
Yep. I will share the recording of that as well as an invitation to the 10th of February. And we will go through the questions you had in the chat, which we don't have been able to answer or deferred a little bit. And yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
And I hope to see all of you soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.